Hey everyone, my name is Tony Burke. I'm an FAA senior rigger as well as AFF instructor in SNTA, and today we're going to talk about what is an FAA TSO and how it affects you. So a couple of disclaimers because we are talking about skydiving after all. This video is based on United States laws. So in the US, skydiving operations, as well as things like reserves and containers and some other equipment, are governed by the FAA. Regulations for other countries can and will differ, so check with your local civil aviation authorities. Like I said, this presentation will be US oriented. But keep in mind, I'm not a lawyer, let alone an aviation lawyer, so this presentation is based on the best information that I have available. So in this video, we're going to talk about what an FAA TSO is, what components require an FAA TSO approval, and who is affected by this requirement. So what is an FAA TSO? It's a minimum performance standard for specified materials, parts, and appliances. In our case, it's just skydiving gear. When authorized to manufacture a material, part, or appliance to a TSO standard, this is referred to as a TSO authorization. Receiving a TSO authorization is both a design and production approval. So it's not just a design approval, but also a production approval. So what components does this cover? For skydiving, it covers containers and reserve canopies. So it does not cover main canopies, AEDs, altimeters, helmets, etc. So those components do not need to have a TSO approval. Who is required to jump TSO approved gear? So these FAR regulations, Federal Aviation Regulations, only pertain to skydiving operations in the United States. And so again, check with your local civil aviation authority for what their rules are. They pertain to U.S. citizens jumping in the U.S. as well as non-U.S. citizens who reside in the U.S. Non-U.S. citizens visiting the U.S. may jump non-TSO'd components. So it's not just skydiving gear that requires a TSO approval. Seatbelts on commercial airliners have this requirement as well. There's some other aviation components too. And the seatbelts are C22 approved, or the seatbelts are C22. Next time you're on a commercial flight, you can take a look at your seatbelt and you'll see a TSO label on there. So of course, skydiving reserves and containers require this TSO approval. Manufacturers will perform specific tests on the components, etc., and then they apply for this approval from the FAA. In the aviation and skydiving community, we commonly refer to this approval as being TSO'd or a TSO'd component. There is a bit of a misconception, and I've seen this confuse some skydivers. Just because a reserve or container has been tested to a certain standard does not mean it's been approved. There are some non-US made reserves and containers that advertise that they have been tested to TSO standards, but they have not received a certification from the FAA. For example, from one manufacturer, I copied this from their website, they say that their container was designed and tested in compliance with the strict rules of the FAA TSO C23F. Now that may very well be, but that manufacturer has not applied for a TSO approval, nor have they received one, so it's not legal to jump in the US unless you're a foreign visitor. So what do these products have in common? We have the Witty Plus from Mars, the Saif from Austria, SWS from Ukraine, and Avalon from Bulgaria. None of these containers or reserves have FAA TSO approval. In fact, they're probably not likely to get it. It's kind of difficult to, it's not kind of, it is very difficult to get a TSO approval if you're not based in the United States for various reasons. Now, that's not to say that these aren't safe. I couldn't tell you. I've actually never worked with any of these pieces of equipment. But just because it's not FAA TSO approved does not necessarily mean it's not safe. But it does mean if you're looking to buy gear that if you're in the United States, these should be precluded from your options. Sometimes I see someone selling like one of these non-TSO reserves or containers, and so they're selling it in a different country, and then I see someone say, hey, I think this might be good for you, and they're pointing to an American citizen, and I'll pop in and say, hey, just so you know, this is not legal to jump in the US as a US citizen. Another thing that can happen is a company loses the ability for whatever reason to manufacture TSO components. So Vortex, it's Parachute Systems out of South Africa, for whatever reason, and I'm not exactly sure why, they are not able to, as far as I know, as of early 2023, they are not able to manufacture any more TSO components. The problem will come if you are jumping a Vortex and you have a cutaway and then you lose your free bag. That's a TSO component. It cannot be replaced because they cannot make a new one for you. So you'd either have to find a used one on the market. And as far as I know, there's no compatibility between other And some rigs will allow other free bags to be installed in their containers. As far as I know, Parachute Systems does not have that. So if you lose your free bag and you have a Vortex, you're kind of out of luck. So that has affected the resale value of Vortexes, and it's something to keep in mind if you're looking to buy a Vortex on the used market. So the C23 series is the TSO series for skydiving containers and reserves. There's C23B, C, D, and F. There was E briefly, but I don't think anything was ever certified on it. It was canceled almost immediately. But C23B goes all the way back to 1949, and there's still reserves and containers that have been certified under that are still being manufactured today. So for example, UPT has the Vector 3. It's one of the best-selling containers in the world, has been certified under C23B. So they're still using that certification to manufacture their gear now. Now, I would not, from a safety perspective, I don't think it much matters. I don't think that a piece of gear that's certified under C23B is necessarily safer or less safe than one that's certified under C23F. What matters much more is the reputation and the manufacturing process of that company that's making that gear. So I wouldn't worry too much about which one of these your gear is certified under. There's way more important things to consider, like the safety features of the container, the size of the reserve, etc. Another point of confusion is the reciprocity agreement between the United States FAA and the EASA, which is an umbrella organization that handles aviation in Europe. The reciprocity agreement just means that if there's an ETSO, so something is certified as under the ETSO, then it is automatically certified as a TSO in the United States and vice versa. So there's reciprocity there. However, the EASA does not do TSOs for sport parachutes and containers anymore. Only bailout rigs. I think they might have done it in the past, but they don't do it now. From the EASA website, personal parachutes within the scope of the EASA are only emergency parachutes for glider and aerobatic pilots. So these are bailout rigs that sometimes you'll see jump pilots wear. They only have a reserve in them, and they're not meant for intentional skydiving operations. So all of the parachutes and containers, recreational, tandem, they're under the responsibility of the relevant member states. And as far as I know, there are no reciprocity agreements between the US FAA and any individual European or any other country, for all that I know, in terms of TSOs. This has led to a little bit of confusion. In fact, I talked to one manufacturer that was outside of the US. They have approval from their local civil aviation authority, and they thought that that meant that they had reciprocity with the FAA. But they do not. Just because it's been approved under their own civil aviation authority does not mean it's a TSO approved component in the US. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Let me know if you have any questions or any corrections down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.